Angels exist throughout cultures and mythologies and religions. There's a lot of different definitions of what angels are in many traditions, including much of Christianity, much of the Abrahamic traditions. Angels are often seen as a kind of special species of being, of spiritual being, often a messenger or herald of the divine. A species that is not necessarily human. In fact, a lot of angels that are described in the Bible don't really look human at all. I have this little pin of what's been called a biblically accurate angel, where it's just like eyes and wings and all kinds of weird, thingies going on. To Swedenborg, all angels are human beings. There's no special category of being called angel. Even the archangels, Swedenborg says, are in fact communities of human beings that have a particular task or a particular inclination, such as Michael or Gabriel or Uriel. All of us, he claims, are primarily spirits clothed with temporary material bodies and continue to be spirits after physical death. I feel like today is one of those Sundays where the readings kind of say it all. I'm almost inclined to just shut up and let us just sit with the readings for longer. So I invite you to sit with those a bit more after this conversation. And of course, as always, I'm just kind of presenting some ideas from Swedenborg with zero expectations for you to adopt or agree with those in any way. Something very important when we look at Swedenborg's Angelology, or his ideas about what angels are and how they operate, is we cannot think of this stuff as linear time and space bound concepts. Swedenborg and his Neoplatonist cosmology, again, and I re-emphasize this because it's kind of important if we want to understand sort of these dynamics. God is at the center, surrounded by emanations of celestial realms, consisting of countless spiritual communities, self-arranged by their individual and communal affections and ideas. And it's this incredibly vast, multifaceted domain. It's much more real, he claims, than what we are used to on Earth. A lot more tangible, a lot more intense in a good way. There are countless countries that he talks about, cities, forests, all corresponding to spiritual states. People have very extensive lives. They have families. They have sexual partners. They have friendships. They have religions. In fact, people of all religious backgrounds who have lived loving and truthful lives based on their personal understanding are represented in Swedenborg's image of heaven. Now, I say we can't grasp this, and Sweetie Bears says we can't grasp this with our linear kind of earthly understanding. This stuff that we read about is not something that exists in some far-away abstract realm, and much less is it something that simply awaits us when we die. Rather, it's a dynamic cosmological arrangement that is present right here, right now, within each of us. And you really can't grasp this stuff without the concept of emanationism, of layers of reality. Reality, based on Swedenborg, consists of the ultimate source, the ultimate center, the divine, which is the only thing that is of true substance, and emanating from that center are countless series of states or realities. The closer they are to the center, the more illuminated they are. The further out you get, the more coarse and distinct things get. We, as emanations of light, who appear to themselves as being separate and autonomous, navigate these realms. And we can navigate them as we wish. The more we situate our spiritual self towards the center, which is love and wisdom, the more closely united we are to each other and to the source and that center itself. And the more we situate our spiritual self towards selfishness and illusion, or in older terms, evil and falsity, the more distant realms we inhabit or perceive ourselves as inhabiting. Now again, this isn't simply some abstract afterlife idea. This is happening right now as we speak. We are inhabiting these realms right now. We just tend to be preoccupied in our attention to this physical plane, which is enlivened and has its substance from the spiritual. The cosmology I describe does not exist in some far-away realm, but within us. Heaven and Hell, Swedenborg writes, it can never be said that heaven is outside of us, for it is within. Our spiritual selves are, right now, in the spiritual world, in the company of other spiritual selves. And how this relates to the afterlife is simply that, according to Swedenborg, when our physical vessels expire, we continue to live in those realms as we were before, and we make a kind of home in the spiritual states we are drawn to. There's no reward, there's no punishment involved in this. Those are, he claims, pretty primitive human concepts. It's all based on agency and self-realization. We simply end up hanging out where we're most comfortable, where we feel most at home. The difference, again, between what he calls a heavenly and a hellish state or society is simply that heavenly states are centered around love and truth and altruism. Love and truth, of course, being those essential divine qualities, and thus closer to the source. And hellish states, which we involuntarily inhabit, are centered around selfishness, falsity, further towards the periphery, in a state of self-induced, willful ignorance. Nobody is burning in hell unless it's their kink and they really want to be. Now, the obvious question is, does this matter? And if so, how? And here's an important reminder from Swedenborg. Beliefs in this system are not salvific. Beliefs are not what gets you there, including beliefs about the afterlife and angels. And ever since Swedenborg published this stuff, some people have found that this framework makes sense on a metaphysical level. And the whole afterlife business is definitely where the name Swedenborg has kind of been most prominent, from spiritualism to the surge of interest in near-death experiences. Of course, Life After Life by Raymond Moody being sort of this groundbreaking work in 1975. And he has a whole chapter devoted to, or subchapters devoted to Swedenborg, which also helped Swedenborg's visibility in public discourse. Many people find that a lot of Swedenborg's reports of his travels to the world or worlds beyond coincide with those of others, be they ancient texts such as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the experience of other mystics and inner teachers, the reports of folks having NDEs or other altered states of consciousness, psychedelic experience, vision quests, deep meditation, etc. Others embrace the metaphysics of Swedenborg's visions because they find that they reconcile philosophical and theological ideas such as the meaning of existence, an unconditionally loving God, the role of Jesus in the history of the earth, the variety and diversity of religion, etc. And on that metaphysical level, meaning that literal level, here are some of the primary conclusions that one would draw, again, from a literal understanding of this stuff, and conclusions that Swedenborg did draw. One of them is, we're all designed to be angels and to live forever in a state of love and joy and pleasure. When our body dies, our consciousness continues and will exist in spiritual states that correspond to our affections and inner desires. We will live in loving community with the people who vibe with those same affections and ideas. We get to be reunited with loved ones if we want to. We get to have a rich love life if we want to, based on true mutual affection and attraction and agency. All religions can get you there, The recipe is simple. Be as loving and as truthful as you can. And as long as your tradition gets you to that point, it is part of God's universal church. Another conclusion is we are constantly in the presence of angels who never compel or compromise our agency, but gently inspire us with goodness and truth that emanates directly from the divine. Another conclusion is that the universe is ultimately a benevolent place. And the source of creation, the center and substance of all that is unconditional love, transcendent wisdom, and the desire to be one with creation. I really like that. I want to believe that. And I am pretty damn convinced that Swedenborg did see what he claims he saw, experienced what he claims he experienced. But there's also a skeptical side within me. Now, you might be hearing this or reading this and be like, oh, this is awesome. This really resonates. Or you might go, meh, I don't buy into it. And both of those are perfectly fine, really, truly. And this might be echoing kind of the last message I gave on astrotheology. And there's some intentionality in that order. Swedenborgians, meaning avid readers of Swedenborg, have fallen all over the spectrum between this is literal metaphysical reality and this is 100% completely psychologized or completely symbolic. And you may find yourself somewhere within that spectrum, or you may not care. You may simply appreciate sort of the approach, the Swedenborgian approach to inclusive, non-dogmatic spiritual community and not resonate at all with this stuff. That's also 100% okay. My role here is simply to share how I think Swedenborg perceived this and a little bit of my own perspective. And that is, very importantly, that there are multiple layers of meaning to this stuff. You notice how important layers and levels are. One is the metaphysical. And I mentioned that he himself really did believe that this stuff was literally going on. Yet, because of the very structure of that spiritual world he describes, there is a deeper and more profound layer in which everything Swedenborg sees in the spiritual world consists, as he says, of visual, spatial, temporal images, which are in fact not in time or space. The whole concept of linear time and set space does not exist in the spiritual world. It only exists to the degree to which it represents spiritual states. In other words, as Swedenborg is going within, and he talks about how the journey to heaven is not a journey outside, but a journey within to the very center, as he's going within into more subtle and more real realms of the spiritual world, which exists of spirit and consists of spirit, not of matter, and are outside of time and space, he is seeing spiritual realities manifested by means of images which he, in his natural earthly mind, can process. And he's very clear about this. It's the outmost, the natural level on which time and space really matter or appear to matter. And it is from that level from which we ask such questions, very valid questions, such as, where will I be after I die? What will it feel like? What will I look like? And those are all extremely relevant questions. But the inner self, the true spiritual self, isn't all that concerned with linear time and set space and exists beyond it. One illustration might be useful. Swedenborg has visions of angels in the highest heaven being completely naked, completely nude. On the literal level, we might conclude from that there's a place in the highest heaven where people are nudists. And we might be like, awesome, I really want to hang out in that heaven. Or it might be kind of like, ooh, that's gross. And we might think about whether we would want to hang out in that particular heaven. And did someone say sure? And at the same time, he's very clear that the meaning of this nakedness is spiritual. It represents a spiritual state of innocence, of purity, of unashamedness. We can hear this and we can meditate on what that then really means for us in a concrete way in our relationship with the divine. What is my inner highest heaven? And do my angelic feelings and emotions and thoughts enjoy a state, or at least strive for a state of complete purity in that realm? When we read the descriptions of characters of the countless spiritual realms he visits, we're able to view them not simply, not exclusively as a logbook of the afterlife, which again is a completely valid perspective, and they claim to be that, but also as a logbook of our own inner world. And they also claim to be that. A collective unconscious that exists and unites us and our source on a level, or rather levels that are far more subtle and yet far more real than this ego-based experience. What if those spiritual realities, those spiritual dynamics, those spiritual laws are in fact universal realities? Spiritual states that exist now and are real and tangible. That we can inhabit these states, these angelic communities of Michael, of Gabriel, or whatever we call them. We can enter heavenly states and cultivate them now. Make them our home. Grow more deeply into that unitive relationship with God and with each other. And if we do that, sure, if we buy into this, the afterlife is going to be awesome. So this reflection is an invitation to both ponder the questions about the afterlife, which these reports may or may not evoke, with a healthy dose of skepticism and agency, and further an invitation to consider these things from an inner perspective. How do these dynamics affect me now? How can I make my inner life more heavenly, more angelic, more love-oriented now? As the writer Lon Milo Duquette puts it, it's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. Amen.